Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
The topmost thing on our minds, even above the coronavirus crisis, is what's happening across our borders in Ladakh with the Chinese. And beginning an argument on that in this week's National Interest, why am I invoking an outrageous, famous, and brilliant American political satirist, P.J. O'Rourke? You will figure out as the argument unfolds. So, P.J. O'Rourke, among the many brilliant things he's written, he wrote maybe 1,000 word or less than 1,000 words history of man, what he headlined as a brief history of man. Now this was written in his own politically incorrect style, and he talked about all the civilizations that rose and fell and rose and survived, etc., etc., etc. In that, he dismisses or describes, you can choose, the Chinese civilization with one short sentence. In China, meanwhile, they were the Chinese. Now, what does it mean? I would guess, as probably I think you would guess also, that he means the inscrutability of the Chinese. That for thousands of years in that country, they are the Chinese who you can't understand, etc., etc. Now, is that true? That is a familiar Western stereotype, and he's only repeating that familiar Western stereotype. But is that correct? Should we buy into it living next door to China? We have lived next door to China for as long as there has been civilization on this earth. We should know the Chinese better. Now, if we look at the Chinese and the pattern of their behavior towards us, particularly since 1960, that is when the die was cast for the war in 1962. Also, it's convenient to go back exactly 6 decades. So, if you look at 1960 onwards, in fact, you will find that rather than be inscrutable, the pattern of their behavior and responses and actions has been entirely predictable. So, almost everything they've done since then vis-a-vis our strategic relationship has been done with a purpose and could have been anticipated. Of course, we are now wiser by the benefit of hindsight. 1962, they launched a war on India. A short, sharp war, one-sided war. They came in, they vacated most of the area they took in that war. Why? Because their purpose was to keep what they already had. That was essentially the territory of Aksai Chin. Their purpose was to keep essentially what they had and what they needed. The rest, if they wanted at that point, they could have taken, but even what they took, say in Arunachal or in Ladakh, they vacated almost all of that, barring a few slivers of tactically important territories in Ladakh. So they went away because the purpose then was one, to teach India a lesson, quote unquote, because they wanted to show the world that India was being upstartish and that they were the big bosses. If you see all their actions since then, this has been the theme always. When they come onto your borders, the idea is to let you know and let the world know who is the big boy in this neighborhood. Now, 62 ended. Then came 65, the war with Pakistan. India was involved with the war with Pakistan. Suddenly, out of the blue, the Chinese said that Indians should return a bunch of yaks and sheep that Indians have stolen in Sikkim. Now, this was as good a joke as any you can find, except that it was in the middle of a war that was going on between India and Pakistan. So this was an ultimatum to India in the middle of a war, obviously to signal to India that they were now jumping in on the Pakistani side. The signal was taken. In 1967, they again probed India or prodded India in Nathula in Sikkim. There was a border clash, there was an exchange of fire, not very different from the clashes that take place these days, but these days there is no exchange of fire. There was an exchange of fire essentially from the Chinese side. It started from the Chinese side, but there was a very sharp response from the Indian side, which the Chinese had not accepted, not expected. Probably because they might have thought that India was at its weakest at that point. India had just fought two wars, 62 and 65. India was on a ship to mouth existence because of the many famines and droughts. India had food shortages. India had political instability because Nehru and Shastri had died in quick succession, and Indira Gandhi was doing very poorly in politics in 1967. And yet, once they saw a very resolute response from India, in fact, there's a book about that response. If you go back to my article, the text version of National Interest, which is linked to this video, you will find my reference to that book. I was quite honored to be asked to write a blurb for that book. So please read that book. That told the Chinese that India now had the resolve to fight back. This was not the India or Indian army of 1962. 1967 was the last time anybody opened fire on India-China borders. So that ensured 53 years of peace. That is not the response of an inscrutable power. That is the response of a predictable, rational power. The Chinese are anything if not rational and pragmatic. And then you see further changes in the pattern of their behavior. Mao Zedong's smiling or maybe giving his Mona Lisa smile to Brajesh Mishra in 1970 in Beijing. Brajesh Mishra was then just the Indian chargé d'affaires because India did not have full diplomatic relations with China at that point. Because that is when India was changing, the Green Revolution, Indira Gandhi was at the peak of her power. And then other messages. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, as foreign minister in the Janta government under Morarji Desai, goes visiting China, an Indian foreign minister after a very long time, and the Chinese test a nuclear weapon while he is there. If you think that was not to convey a message, you have to be mistaken or you have to be very lazy intellectually. And then you carry on from there. 1986-87, the probe at Wangdong or Sumdorong Chu. That was again a time when Rajiv Gandhi was really building India's military. He had taken India's defense budget above that self-imposed Lakshman Rekha of 4% of GDP for the first time and last time in India's history. In fact, it had gone up to about 4.2% depending on how you calculate it. It was also a time when on that high, General Sundarji was holding exercise brass tacks. India was caught up in this big tension with Pakistan. That is when the Chinese probed India at Wangdong or Sumdorong Chu in Arunachal Pradesh. Again, the display of Indian resolve. India responded with exercise checkerboard, moved a lot of forces. That convinced the Chinese that India was willing, India had it in its guts to fight back. Once again, not a shot was fired. There was a peaceful de-escalation. Everybody went home. But still, a message was conveyed to India. And what was the message? That when you are messing with Pakistan, our ally, you know that something can happen elsewhere also. So, two-front war is a strategic counterweight that the Chinese have always used against India. And similarly, if you carry on to Chomar, the more recent issues, the Chomar intrusion, then Doklam, then what happens every time Dalai Lama goes to Tawang? There is a pattern to all that. The Chinese come, they deliver a message, and then they go away, having secured some more leverage and delivered a message to you and the world. In Doklam, for example, the message they were delivering was to India, but more importantly to Bhutan, to say that, look, there are limitations to what India can do for you. We are the big brother in your neighborhood. Talk to us and make your peace with us. So this is the pattern. Now, looking at all this, will you call it inscrutable or predictable? So I quote two conversations because we journalists are not experts at anything. But we have one privilege that we are able to find time from experts or people who are much more knowledgeable and wiser than others, and we learn from them. India's strategic thought, we've learned from people like Dr. K. Subramaniam, or from that generation now to say C. Raja Mohan, all the wise people, General Sundarji in the middle, so many other people. On politics, we've also learned, or the political, on the Indian political strategic thinking, we've also learned from wise people like Dr. Manmohan Singh, Narasimha Rao, and Atal Bihari Vajpayee. So I quote two conversations in this piece, one with Dr. Manmohan Singh and second with Atal Bihari Vajpayee. With Dr. Manmohan Singh, he used to occasionally call a bunch of editors and talk to them off the record. I'm only recounting this now because one editor in that group did not keep the off the record commitment in the Times of India, and a story based on that conversation was published there the next day. Otherwise, I would never talk about this. So he said that, look, the problem that India has is that China uses Pakistan as a very cheap instrument to keep India off balance. So India thereby is triangulated between China and Pakistan. China has to do nothing but just keep Pakistan going. In fact, keep selling its arms to Pakistan, which Pakistan gratefully pays for, and balances India with that. India has to break out of this triangulation. That is India's number one strategic challenge, he said. His way of trying to break out of that was to reach out to Pakistan and try and make peace with them. One, because he thought there was more to share there. Second, because he thought Pakistan had more to gain from peace with India than China. Third, because China is much more powerful than India. India is much more powerful than Pakistan. And if India wanted peace in this case, there was a better chance. Foreign powers, particularly the US, might be able to exercise leverage over Pakistan in such a situation. And also, where was the urgency for China to mend its relations with India when it had such a cheap triangulation available? If you look at Vajpayee also understood this, and he also understood the Chinese mind. So once lecturing us about the Chinese negotiating style, he said, आप और हम आमने सामने बैठे हैं, negotiate कर रहे हैं. You and I are talking and negotiating. I might say, okay, I'll give you everything, but you give me this. You will say no. I'll say, give me this. You will say no. I'll say, give me this much. You will say no. I will say, give me this much at least. Chances are that you will say yes. I said, okay. He said the Chinese would never do it. The Chinese never concede anything in a negotiation. So once again, he knew the Chinese are predictable and he knew the Chinese mind. Now, see how Narendra Modi, when he took over, he approached the same question. He also knew and knows that India has to break out of the triangulation. He reversed the approach from the approach that Manmohan Singh had followed and before that Vajpayee had followed. The approach of going out and making up with Pakistan to break out. He tried to do it through China. That's why all these lavish welcomes to Xi Jinping, and that's why these very frequent meetings with Chinese top leaders in his 6 years. But it is now becoming evident and should have been evident that unless the Chinese have a big incentive to make peace with India, they will not do so. But for Modi BJP, it's tough to challenge China in a way, Chinese strategic thinking, by reaching out to Pakistan, because hostility with Pakistan is very central to the politics of the Modi BJP formulation. So that is where we are stuck right now. Now, why are the Chinese here? Don't ask me where exactly they are, because I don't know. Whether they are on Indian territory, their own territory, along the LAC, in an undefined area, I don't know. If I knew, I might be able to tell you. I can't read satellite pictures. I've seen some pictures. If you go and show those pictures to anybody, the response you will get will depend on whether somebody is with Modi government or against Modi government. So at a time which is so polarized that a cheap 50 paisa drug like hydroxychloroquine becomes so politicized to think that satellite pictures of where the Chinese are in these barren mountains are going to be easy to interpret is a mistake. So nobody can understand that, at least I can't understand that. Having said that, on August 5 last year, when we made the big changes in Kashmir, we should have known that this will happen this year. Why? Because when those changes were made, India issued new maps, India repeated our old claims. Aksai Chin is an entire area that we claim in India, that we believe China is illegally occupying. Home Minister Amit Shah said in Parliament that we will take back Aksai Chin even at the cost of our lives. The Chinese were listening. And then other things happened, including new maps, weather reports, everything. And then persistent and strong and strident, not routine, strident objections to CPEC passing through Pakistan occupied Kashmir as a project going through our Indian territory illegally occupied by Pakistan. So Chinese were listening and following this. We should have expected the Chinese to respond. In fact, we should have also known the timing of the response, because all it was waiting for was for the snows to melt in the Himalayas. As soon as the snows have melted, the Chinese have come in. This, if anybody did not anticipate this, okay, you can't say where will they come and what exactly will happen. But the fact is, in the territorial jumble around Kashmir, I've explained this a couple of times in Cut the Clutter, in the territorial jumble around Kashmir, there's a third country involved besides India and Pakistan, and that is China. So that is what is now coming back and visiting us. This is something entirely anticipated, and this is something that I hope the policymakers did game for, and they are going to be able to deal with.